Guys, it's been officially 7 weeks since George Floyd was killed in broad daylight. There was an article published about how the police camera footage transcription was released. And you could hear George Floyd saying, "I cannot breathe, please, they'll kill me, they'll kill me." To which Officer Derek Chauvin, pig, replies, "Takes a heck of a lot of oxygen for you to speak if you can't breathe." Moments later, George Floyd went unresponsive and died. We're still seeking justice, for the record. Join us. This week, I stumbled on an incredible painting by a man named Titus Kaphar called Behind the Myth of Benevolence. It was released in 2014, and it is a picture of a Black woman shown behind the curtain of a white man. This painting hit me right in the chest. I was speechless when I stumbled on this painting. I had to know exactly what it was about. I wanted to know what the artist said and why he made such a beautiful, powerful painting. In Titus's own words, this painting is a depiction of Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman owned by Thomas Jefferson, who bore 6 of his children. He also says, "The woman who sits here is not just simply a representation of Sally Hemings. She's more of a symbol of the many Black women whose stories have been shrouded by the narratives of our deified founding fathers." And if you don't know, to deify means worship, regard, or treat someone as a god, as many often do of our founding fathers, namely Thomas Jefferson. So let's get into the story and the life of Sally Hemings. Sally is known as one of the most famous Black women in history that no one knows about. There is such controversy about her relationship with Thomas. Many argue that they were a couple. Let's break down how that is total bullshit. Just on the outskirts, when I did a little bit of research on Sally, what I learned immediately was that she was given over to Jefferson when she was 2. You would think, okay, besides the fact that she's enslaved, that's essentially like adopting a daughter, right? Well, when she was 14, he started having sex with her. Today, we would probably call that, rape or sexual harassment but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning. Okay, 1773, and Sally Hemings is born. The date and time is not written down, as we find out most things about Sally have not been written down. Her life, in her own words, have either been hidden or, more likely, burned. Now this is where it gets really tricky and really disgusting. There was a white man named John Wales at the top of the family tree. He essentially had 2 wives. One was a white woman named Martha Epps, and the other was a Black enslaved woman named Elizabeth Hemings. Just for the record, that wasn't his wife. He just had sex with her whenever he wanted. And then it's not called rape because you own them, right? John and Elizabeth together have 6 children, one of which is Sally Hemings. John and Martha together have Martha Wales. Martha Wales marries Thomas Jefferson. So let me just clarify here. John Wales has sex with 2 different women. They have daughters. Those daughters are stepdaughters. And Thomas Jefferson has sex with both of those stepdaughters. Thomas Jefferson and Martha live on a plantation in Monticello, Virginia. After John Wales dies, that is Sally Hemings' father, Sally is given to Thomas Jefferson as an inheritance to his father-in-law's estate, which also includes all of his enslaved persons. Elizabeth and Sally and all of her brothers and sisters are given over to Thomas Jefferson. How lovely. Sally comes into Thomas Jefferson's life when she's around 2 years old. She's a toddler. She ends up growing up with his children. She is known to become a nursemaid to Jefferson and Martha's younger daughter, Maria. Well, in 1787, when Sally is 14, she is asked to accompany Maria to Paris, France, where Jefferson also has another household. Paris in the 1780s was a global phenomenon of culture and art. And there was about 1 million people there, 1,000 of whom were free Black residents. So when Hemings shows up in 1787, she's technically a free woman. In Paris, Hemings is reunited with her older brother James, whom Thomas Jefferson brought over 2 years prior so that he would learn French cooking for the family. She in turn learns French cooking, she also learns how to speak French, and she receives training in needlework and clothing care to suit her for the position of lady's maid for Maria in her older years. Now, according to Madison Hemings, the son of Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson, the only real, true, honest, documented information that we have in truth about Sally is what Madison witnessed growing up in the household watching Sally and Thomas interact. Madison Hemings recounts that when they returned to Monticello, his mother becomes Thomas Jefferson's concubine. Now this is where what Sally Hemings did was in fact brave and amazing on behalf of her children. Sally knew that even though she was in Paris and that she was considered a free woman, she would never be free as long as she was owned by the Thomas Jefferson household. She also was already pregnant with Thomas Jefferson's child. Let me just remind you that in 1787, Sally was 14 years old. She didn't really have much choice because then she gets pregnant with Thomas's child. Now she realizes she has an opportunity here to barter. She has an opportunity to negotiate the life of her child, the life of the children she knows will come, and the life that she has left to live on this earth. So she says to Thomas, I will come back with you to Monticello if you give me A, extraordinary privileges, and free my future children. Jefferson agrees. 2 years later, in 1789, they arrived back to Monticello together. They had at least 6 children together, 2 of which did not make it, 4 of which survived to adulthood and to their own personal freedom, as promised by Thomas Jefferson. Sally and all of her children are known to be considered white passing, which became a huge controversy as to why they stuck around in the family for so long and no one knew Thomas Jefferson bore black children. In 1822, Beverly, their son, and Harriet, their daughter, are allowed to leave Monticello without being legally freed. Madison Hemings later reports that they both pass into white society, and neither their connection to Monticello nor their African blood was ever discovered. Finally, in 1826, Thomas Jefferson dies. Jefferson's will officially frees Hemings' younger children, Eston and Madison. In 1830, Sally and her sons, Eston and Madison, are listed as free white people in the 1830 census. 3 years later, there is a special census that happens after the Nat Turner Rebellion in 1831, where Sally happily, finally, lists herself as a free mulatto who lived in Charlottesville since 1826. Madison reported that he lived with his mother in Charlottesville until her death in 1835. The location of her grave is unknown. Here are some things I want you guys to think about. There are consequences to freedom. While Sally's children were eventually freed, Beverly and Harriet had to completely disregard their family lineage in order to be white passing in society so that they would not be harmed or maimed or raped or tortured in any way. Because of this, their family lineage is cut off and falsified. You can't find any known descendants of Beverly or Harriet. However, both Madison and Eston acknowledged that they were sons of Thomas Jefferson, and they passed this knowledge on to their children. People just assumed because their children's skin had a lighter tone to them that they were white passing, that they couldn't possibly have had children together. Sally dressed up in refined dresses. Because she is known to be light-skinned and white passing and so beautiful, they were able to look past the fact that she was black, and they were able to look past the fact that Thomas Jefferson raped her and that they had children together. There are reports of mulatto children on the Thomas Jefferson plantation, and somehow everybody turned an eye and said, no, those are Thomas and Martha's children. They just happen to suntan really well. This is a painful, complicated American story about Thomas Jefferson, who is supposedly one of the best founding fathers. And yet, he was a lifelong slave owner who kept Sally Hemings and their children in bondage. Sally Hemings should be known today not as Thomas Jefferson's concubine, but as an enslaved woman who had the bravery at age 16 to negotiate with one of the most powerful men in the nation to not only improve the condition of her life, but to achieve freedom for her children. That is the story that I want to know about. There is a narrative out there still to this day that Thomas Jefferson's paternity is in question with these children. There are oral histories, recollections, documents, data identifying Thomas Jefferson as the father to Sally Hemings' children. Namely, Madison Hemings took a test and he has a Y chromosome that completely matches up with Thomas Jefferson. So why are there still people out there denying this? Because denial is so much easier. Because racism doesn't exist. Because all lives matter. It's a crock of shit. And because there's no vocalized or written word by Sally Hemings herself, and because she never had a diary that was found that explained that he raped her, well, that couldn't possibly have happened. They couldn't possibly have had children together, and Thomas Jefferson would never do that. What an astounding man. He couldn't possibly have raped a 14-year-old and made her have his children. In 1802, James Callender, a former political ally of Thomas Jefferson's, came out against him and called Sally Thomas Jefferson's concubine in a paper and printed it for all to see. And even though Thomas Jefferson's family denied it until his death, and even now, there is no denying the accounts of Madison Hemings, Sally's own son. Who knows who his father is? Who knows who his father is? And as far as him being an incredible founding father, he writes in 1785 in his only book called Notes on the State of Virginia that white Americans and black enslaved people constitute two separate nations who could not live peacefully together in the same country. Why is this story important? Just like the painting that Titus Kaphar made as a representation of these black women that stand behind these white men and lift them up and make them better and create children for them and keep their secrets, Sally Hemings did just that in order to free her own children. How many other black enslaved women did the same thing to save themselves, to save their children, to have some sort of quality of life? We'll never know exactly what the relationship was between her and Thomas. But I'm pretty sure that if today we found out that a prominent white man was having sex with a 14-year-old and then had 6 children and they happened to look just like her running around in his household, I'm pretty sure we would imprison him. This is a debate that's going on right now. There's no evidence, there's no proof, there isn't a pandemic, there isn't racism. It's still happening even today. Women, especially black women, having to dim their light in order to make sure their sons and daughters are not murdered. On behalf of Sally Hemings and all of the women who were brave enough to stand up against the most powerful men in the nation, I say thank you. And to the black women who are still using their voice and body to stand against the powerful racism in this country, I thank you for your life. I thank you for your work. I hear you. I see you. I thank you. In the link in my bio above is a video of Madison Hemings' accounts of his mother and her relationship with Thomas Jefferson and what he remembers of his accounts growing up with his mother and his father. I encourage you to watch the video. I encourage you to do your own research, to educate, to donate, to support Black-owned businesses, to stand behind Black women, to use your white, non-person of color voice, to stand for what is right, to be an ally. There are so many other stories out there like Sally's. Find a story, make it matter. I believe in you. You are able.